Hi, everybody, and welcome to Out of the Gate, Daily Racing Form's weekend handicapping preview program. I'm Dan Illman. Thanks so much for watching. Here's what's on tap this week from Out of the Gate. Matt Bernier, Mike Beer, and I will handicap the Grade 2 $1.25 million Charlestown Classic. It's your DRF.com formulator race of the day, and free formulator past performances are available for download on the Race of the Day event page on DRF.com. The boys and I will also go through the Grade 3 Illinois Derby at Hawthorne, the Grade 2 Elkhorn Stakes at Keeneland, and the Grade 2 Calforinian Stakes at Santa Anita, while also giving our best bets on the Saturday card. Jonathan Kinchin will give a late pick 3 play from Keeneland, and Nicole Russo's pedigree pick this week. Well, 2-year-old racing has already started at Keeneland, at Aqueduct, at Gulfstream, and she'll tell you everything you need to know about handicapping this year's freshman sires. We begin each week here on Out of the Gate with our hot topic. The Kentucky Derby prep season is over. We are just about ready for the Kentucky Derby, and everybody is wondering how the race will be run from a pace standpoint. Craig Milkowski from TimeformUS has an early pace projector. Let's go to Craig for this week's hot topic.
Hello, this is Craig Milkowski of TimeformUS. This week's hot topic for Out of the Gate is the TimeformUS pace projector for the Kentucky Derby. This is as it stands now. They're listed in order of points earned on the Derby trail, with horses that are not pointing to the Derby eliminated. Obviously, the post positions will become final in a few weeks and will change as they go. The pace projector itself, the first thing that sticks out is you'll notice the red disco rectangle, which shows that the pace is expected to be fast. This isn't really unusual for a race with a big field like this. It's a full 20-horse field almost always for the Derby. And as a matter of fact, 2 of the horses that are deep closers aren't even shown because they would be so far back they can't fit in. We'll talk about both of those later, actually. We're going to start with the top 3 speed horses in the race. The first one that we show is Irish War Cry. He's shown as the number 5 because he's 5th in points. And he's shown a lot of speed in all his races. This year, he took the Holy Bull wire to wire. And based on that, he went to the Fountain of Youth as a heavy favorite, where he drew an outside post position. He got caught kind of wide through really fast fractions. You can see those with the 141 pace figures highlighted in red. And he just threw in the towel late. He rebounded nicely in the Wood Memorial, where he once again drew the far outside. But this time, despite still going pretty fast, you see nice pace figures on him. He was able to rate in a little bit and finish well, and was able to pull away late and win that race pretty easily. But he should be part of the pace. Another is State of Honor. This is a horse that just seems like he really wants to lead. He's pulled hard in his last couple races. He did get a little bit of traffic trouble early, which tried to probably prevented him from making the lead last time or being a bigger pace factor. But he's definitely one I expect to be right up near the front early. Milkowski's an interesting horse in that he was undefeated in 3 starts, I believe, going into the Arkansas Derby, where he drew the far outside post position of 12. He did show some speed. You can see early in his career he showed some sprint speed. He was up close to a pace in the 6.5 furlong allowance race. But in that Arkansas Derby, he just got hung wide around the turn. And he made a nice move. He got right up to the lead. He was only a head off with about a furlong to go before, justifiably packing it in. But he's one I would expect to also be a part of the pace. Of those not shown right up front, Battle of Midway is maybe the most interesting as a pace factor. He ran some really fast fractions, as you can see in red. He ran 140s in the Santa Anita Derby. And though the race kind of fell apart late, at least he didn't completely fall apart. He hung in for second. The reason he's not shown up closer is his other races, he's really never shown to be a speed-crazy horse. His last, he rated off moderate fractions in an allowance race while wide and was able to win. So he's one who could be part of the pace, might depend on post-draw. That said, with the given fast pace, let's take a look at some closers. Gunnevera is probably the best in the field. He has the best late pace rating of 117, which is 12 points higher than anybody currently drawn in. There are a couple slots down that are closer, but he's the top now. I think the thing to notice with him is how far back he dropped in the Florida Derby when he was favored. He looked good going in, but he just went too far back. That outside post, he drew 10 of 10. And you notice his pace figure was a 32 at that first quarter, and he just gave himself no chance. I expect him to drop far back in the Derby, but I don't think he'll be going that slow, and he should really be flying late. A couple others are J-Boy's Echo, who you see, he closed nicely to win the Grade 3 Gotham at Aqueduct with a nice 118 Timeform US speed figure. He had a little trouble at the start of the Bluegrass Stakes last time, but he could be a factor in the lane. The other one to note is McCracken, who he missed some training and he missed the Tampa Bay Derby, came back for the Bluegrass, and he looked a little keen. He was up a lot closer than he usually is and didn't have his same normal kick. But I expect him to revert to the style of coming from well back that won him his first 4 starts. So he should be a strong factor as well. Keep in mind the field is fluid for the Kentucky Derby, and it will change almost assuredly. A couple will drop out, a couple will draw in, and the pace projector will change. It adapts on the fly. So try to keep up to date at TimeformUS. Thanks for watching Out of the Gate. Now we'll go back to Dan.
We begin the handicapping portion of Out of the Gate with the Grade 2 $1.25 million Charlestown Classic, race number 11 at Charlestown on Saturday. And let's take a peek at this field. Remember, for expanded stakes previews of all graded stakes races this weekend, head on over to video.drf.com. We handicap each horse and analyze them from the A to the Z. We bring in our in-studio handicappers, Mike Beer, Matt Bernier, and we're going to discuss the Charlestown Classic. We've got 2 of the last 3 winners of the Charlestown Classic in this race, Matt, and the horse to beat, arguably, is the number 1 Stanford.
Stanford comes in raging form for Pletcher. He wore blinkers for the first time last time, most recently down at Tampa, and he looked really good. I believe he set a stakes record down at Tampa. We know that this racetrack isn't going to be a problem for him. I think the big concern, if you're a Stanford fan or you're backing him on Saturday afternoon, has to be the pace scenario, because it looks like it could be quite quick.
That's because Luch Stables has 3 horses entered in this race, including Cautious Giant, recently claimed, stretching out, and for all appearances' sake, Mike, could be a rabbit. That could set things up for one of the other Luch horses, Imperative, who we know loves this track.
Yeah, I guess that's why that horse is in here, probably to make sure there's some pace for him. Not that there's no other pace signed on anyway. We already talked that Stanford probably wants to get forward from the rail. Linda Rice's horse, Matt King Cole, who feels like maybe a little bit of an up-and-comer in this division. That horse has shown nothing but speed in all his races. So, yeah, I think Matt's right. There's probably going to be at least, if not a really fast pace, a competitive one up there.
As you say, the pace should be fast. That should set things up very nicely for Sunny Ridge, a horse that has experience over a bull ring-like racetrack, Mike.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I like about him. As a 2-year-old, they took him down to Delta Downs for the Delta Jackpot. I thought he ran great in that race. A race that didn't set up that great for him either, with the Exaggerator just sort of getting out to an easy lead. This horse had to make a big run at him. I liked the way that he handled the bull ring that day. He hasn't always been the luckiest horse in the world. He's had some trips work against him. The last 2 races, both wins for him, both the best races of his career. He got really good trips both times, but I just like the way that he ran both times. I think he's going to get a really nice setup in this race. When he won the Stymie last time, there was a pretty big pace going on in that race, but he made a nice run into it, and he closed it down relatively easily. I like this horse, Dan. I like the way he's headed. I like the trip he projects for in this race, and I like him in here.
And Sunny Ridge beat Sendinin in the Stymie, who came back and I guess flattered the effort with a 119 Beyer performance. In his very next race, we see Sunny Ridge striding away from the field in the Stymie. He is in excellent form, Matt. Where's War Story now from a form standpoint? It looked like he was slowly getting better towards the end of last year. I thought he ran perfectly fine in the Pegasus World Cup. What happened last time?
Well, I think he was just against the grain of the one-turn races down at Gulfstream Park, and I know maybe that's just become a bit of a crutch for me, but this is a horse that was much farther back. He was basically outrun early on, and I'm really not a fan of the way that race has come back, but I do think this horse, he ran too well in the Pegasus, he ran too well in the Queens County. I understand that was on a gold rail back at Aqueduct over the inner dirt, but I feel like some of his best races are just better than some of the other ones in this race, and you brought up the whole situation with Luch, with the rabbit. I'm hopeful that War Story gets the jump on his uncoupled stablemate coming from the back imperative. I hope they end up having some sort of little exacta there.
My selection isn't very exciting. I think Stanford is the most likely winner in this race. He might be the most talented horse in the race. But as the guys mentioned, the key to this race is pace. Will Stanford be as effective sitting off of a horse as he is when he's on the lead? Last year in the Charlestown Classic, he set a very rated pace and he was able to scoot on home. Last time out in the Challenger Stakes at Tampa Bay Downs, same thing. Same situation in the Grade 3 Harlan's Holiday Stakes at Gulfstream Park 3 starts back. He was able to make the lead very easily. He's not going to make the lead in the Charlestown Classic, but I think he can tuck into a nice pocket spot early, and if these speeds falter, he might be the one to get the jump on War Story, who might be able to get the jump on Imperative. I like Stanford. I also have to use the number 2 Sunny Ridge, Mike's top selection in here. He's razor sharp, and he might get the right trip. Now let's move to the 3-year-olds, perhaps prepping for the Preakness in the Illinois Derby. Let's take a look at the Grade 3 $250,000 Illinois Derby, race 5 at Hawthorne on Saturday. And again, for expanded stakes previews of all the graded stakes races, head on over to video.drf.com. Gentlemen, a field of 7. These horses are going to go 1.1 miles and perhaps will prep for a race like the Preakness. Speaking of prep races, Matt, the number 2 hedge fund exits the Sunland Derby, which has surprisingly become a very strong prep race.
Yeah, I think some people could make maybe a tongue-in-cheek sort of argument that the Sunland Derby was the most important prep, or the most productive prep of the Kentucky Derby season. Hedge fund ran fine enough, I guess. I don't have anything to really knock about it other than the fact that on the far turn it looked like he was going to run last, and somehow he still ended up finishing third. He battled with IRAP, but I guess in a race like this he fits very well, doesn't he?
IRAP, of course, came back to win the Bluegrass as a maiden. Conquest Mo Money, the runner-up of the Sunland Derby, finished an excellent second in the Arkansas Derby. Matt, let's talk about the horse you like in here, a horse exiting another Triple Crown prep race. That's Hollywood Handsome on the outside.
Yeah, Hollywood Handsome comes in here for Dallas Stewart, just kind of a grinder. I don't think you're going to be blown away by this horse. But the distance, I think, is really going to be the thing that helps him. At 1.1 miles, I thought the Louisiana Derby was just fine, considering it was against better horses. And if you just want to kind of play that game and look and see that field as opposed to this one, this is going to be a little bit of a class drop, I would believe. I think the pace should set up pretty well for him. I think he's going to come with a long, sustained bid, and he should be a decent number. I think hedge fund's going to take quite a bit of money.
If he gets a little bit of pace, you know he's going to be rolling late. Dallas Stewart does very, very well with these 3-year-old one-run closers this time of year. But Mike, you're looking for a horse that's a little bit unexposed, one that hasn't gone through the prep roars. You're going down towards the rail with Multiplier.
Yeah, and I just wanted to take a horse who was sort of a little bit lightly raced anyway in this field, if only because everybody in this field, they sort of have a top figure in a really tight range. They all sort of look like the same horse right now. 83 to 86 are the top buyer speed figures on fast dirt anyway to this point. There is an 89 on a wet track. So I just felt like somebody with upside might have found the right field here. I'm hoping it's Multiplier. He's very lightly raced, and I like basically all 3 of his races so far. Right from the start, I thought he ran well in his debut after missing the break. And his next 2 starts, I think he took small steps forward, including his maiden win last time. I thought he made a nice run off the turn in this race. He took it right over in the stretch. I think the 1.1 miles should be okay for this horse, and I like that there's a little bit of pace in this race. I feel like there's enough pace in here anyway to set up this horse from off the pace.
He really was moving, as you see right there, to take the lead and go on with his business. 2 questions I have for you. 1, are you concerned that this maiden race hasn't come back very strong? And 2, when you look at this pedigree just on the face of it, and I know Brendan Walsh has run this horse 3 times around 2 turns, feeling like this horse wants distance, but when you look at the pedigree, a horse by the factor out of a trippy mare, does 9 furlongs worry you?
Yeah, it does a little bit. I like his running style for the race, though, and again, I do like the fact that Brendan Walsh has just gone along with him right from the start, and I like the way that he's finished in all 3 of his races anyway, so I'm hoping the distance is okay for him. I do like the factors going long, but you're right about the damn side pedigree. It's a little bit shaky for distance.
We touched about hedge fund for Todd Pletcher. I just think this class drop is really what he wants. My feeling is that Henson, Conquest, Mo Money are simply better than he is. They ran right by him like he was tied to the quarter pole in the Sunland Derby. I don't think he needs the lead to succeed. I think he's going to sit just off the pace if that's the trip they allow. Todd's had good luck at Hawthorne in the past, and I think he is showing some confidence in hedge fund, throwing him right back into another graded stakes race. I think he fits very well in here, although I wouldn't take anything less than 2 to 1. 2, 6, 7, and 1 for me in the Grade 3 Illinois Derby. We'll be back with more Out of the Gate after these messages.
You asked, we listened. DRF Plus has more flexible subscription options. Use DRF Plus Basic for exclusive news and analysis, including our DRF Live real-time news feed. Or go deeper with DRF Pro and unlock buyers, closer looks, picks, and reports, including the DRF Daily Game Plan. DRF TV viewers get 50% off the plan of your choice. Use code DRFTV50 at checkout. Learn more about the DRF Plus subscription plans at drf.com/plus.
Welcome back to Out of the Gate. Let's move to Keeneland for race number 9. Their feature is the Grade 2 Elkhorn, going 1.5 miles on the turf. We've got a really salty field of older, long-distance turf runners. $250,000 is the purse. For expanded stakes previews, head on over to video.drf.com. Let's bring in our in-studio handicappers, Matt and Mike. And course condition could play a big factor in this race, Matt. We expect a lot of rain at Keeneland on Saturday.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting for a couple of horses that have never really had to deal with that. I prefer to lean toward horses in a situation like that where we know that the ground isn't going to be an issue for them. Luckily enough, Mike Maker has a small army that's planned on entering in here. Some of them may not end up going if the rain does come as heavily as it sounds like it's going to, but there's one in particular that I like that I know the ground isn't going to bother him, whether it's firm or it's yielding.
We'll get to your selection in a minute, but Mike, I want to touch on Taglib, who's another one of those strong Michael Maker horses. Maybe not at his best on softer footing,
Right.
but it seems all this horse does is show up and run hard each and every time.
I feel like that's the case for just about all the Maker horses in this race, but it's certainly true of Taglib. I mean, he was a good horse before Maker got him. Maker sort of decided to go longer distances with him, and he's kept him going in a very good direction. I like his races, Dan. I thought he was pretty good winning 2 starts back. Last time, boy, I just thought he got a really nice trip and ride from Jose Ortiz, and he just wasn't quite good enough in the stretch. I have no knocks on this horse. He's just one of those who I feel like could take some money in this race. I don't know that I'd be willing to actually bet real money on him at any kind of short price.
Matt, what do you make of Red Rifle, a horse that was really, really good towards the summer of 2015? Didn't really run to that form last year, but he came off the layoff last time out and had some trouble at Gulfstream. It was a good effort, showing some spark.
Yeah, he had a miserable trip, didn't he? I think it was just one of those things where the trip didn't work out for Javier. One thing led to another. He comes on very nicely at the end, and that was at a distance probably much too short. Now he gets back out to the 1.5 miles. We know on his best day, he's just simply better than some of these. The question now becomes, do you want to find out at a shortish number that maybe he is or isn't the horse that we saw in 2015 when he was so good at Saratoga?
Usually a good idea to go with Maker in these long-distance turf races. Matt, you're going with bigger picture, and he's just another consistent hard trier.
He's just rock solid. He shows up and runs his race each and every time. And I have to be honest, I feel like he was a little bit unlucky in the most recent start in the McDermott that was down at Gulfstream, simply because at the top of the lane, right when we had the spot shadow come up, Jose Ortiz lost the stick. And I'm not suggesting that was the difference maker, but it certainly didn't help his cause. And when you see how close he was at the end of this thing, it just makes me think that, you know what, if he runs this race, or if he takes a small step forward, he's just going to be very, very tough to deal with. He's not going to be any sort of real price in here, but I believe he's 7-2 on the morning line. If he's anywhere near that, I would be content.
He has the tactical speed to get any kind of a trip, and he does fire each and every time. Mike, you like It's in the Post in here, coming in from Southern California. We've been very impressed with some of his recent races. Now he's got to prove it outside of California.
Yeah, he's got a ship, and I guess if we do get the rain that's forecast for Keeneland, maybe that won't be a great thing for this horse who's been, running over those mostly firm turf courses in Southern California. I just like his form since Jeff Mullins took over his training, and I got him stretched out in distance a little bit. His most recent couple of races going long, I think are both very good. In particular, the last one, Dan, 1.5 miles for the first time. I thought he ran great in that race. I actually loved Sugar, the favorite, got to the front in there, and then he really picked up the pace up the backstretch in that race. But this horse, It's in the Post, managed to keep right up with him all the way, drove him down in the stretch and was clear under the wire. I really liked that performance from him. I want to give him a chance to reproduce it at Keeneland. I was just really impressed with his last race.
Really strong effort last time out from It's in the Post. I like his tactical speed as well, and I'm going to go with Mike in here. I'm hoping that he can sit just off the pace and maybe handle a little bit of give in the ground. He did win over good turf in Southern California, but for me, from any kind of a multiple race wagering standpoint, this race looks like a spread. I'm going to use It's in the Post. I'm going going to use Taglib. I'm going to use Bigger Picture. We've got Nicole Russo with some pedigree pick opinions. 2-year-olds just starting to run now at Aqueduct, Gulfstream, Keeneland. Nicole's going to tell you which freshman sires to keep an eye on as we head through 2017. Saratoga and Del Mar not too far away. Then Jonathan Kinchin has a late pick 3 pick at Keeneland on Saturday. Let's go to those segments.
Hey guys, Nicole Russo coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, and 2-year-old racing has begun in major jurisdictions around the country. A solid group of freshman sires with their first 2-year-olds this year, and we're going to take a look at their credentials and how you might want to evaluate and play their offspring as you start seeing them in race programs. And any discussion of this year's freshman sires, I think, starts with 4 accomplished runners you'll know well. Shanghai Bobby, himself a juvenile champion, Kentucky Derby winners Orb and Animal Kingdom, the latter a versatile Eclipse champion, and Preakness winner Oxbow, all standing in Kentucky. Shanghai Bobby is by Harlan's Holiday, who has quietly become a solid sire of sires with sons out there like leading juvenile sire Into Mischief. Shanghai Bobby himself got out of the gate fast, winning his maiden at Aqueduct at first asking, going 4.5 furlongs. He worked his way right up through the levels and stretched out to middle distances successfully to win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. One would expect his foals to run early and show that juvenile ability as he did. So keep that in mind as you're seeing them in these early season sprints. His first foals have been very well regarded at yearling and juvenile sales, including a colt sold at Keeneland September last fall for more than $500,000. That's an outstanding price for a first-year sire in a market that's trended more toward proven stock since recovering from the recession. Shanghai Bobby's foals just terrific physicals with good bone, powerful muscle structure. They're well regarded by bloodstock experts, and Shanghai Bobby expected to contend for this year's freshman sire title. Orb was a later developing sort of horse. He came along in the spring of his 3-year-old year with those impressive wins in the Florida Derby and Kentucky Derby. His foals were given kind of a mixed reception as yearlings, but they've really started to blossom physically now and are well received at early season juvenile sales, including a colt sold for $1.25 million at OBS March. And as we've just discussed, that's a terrific price for a first-year sire. And when people are paying these sorts of prices at juvenile sales, they expect the horse to deliver early as a return on investment. Now, Orb's Derby win came on a wet track. His own sire, Malibu Moon, can get a wet track horse. So keep that in mind when handicapping his offspring when you're looking at the weather. Oxbow scored his biggest win in the 2013 Preakness over Orb. He's got stallion ability on both sides of his pedigree. His sire's Awesome Again, who has sons at stud, of course, including Ghost Sapper. He's from the female family of Tis Now. Also the family of 2 of this year's other freshmen, Awesome Patriot and Painter. Oxbow's own development and the development of some of these stallions and their progeny in his family says to me that his runners might start really hitting their best stride with a few more months under their belt development-wise. So look for them as we get into the summer season. Animal Kingdom might be best known for winning the Kentucky Derby, but we're going to take a look here at what I consider his best race. When he was second to champion Wise Dan, even with a troubled trip in the Breeders' Cup Mile, he was coming off a layoff and with only 1 race in the prior 18 months, just a phenomenal talent. He ran well on all surfaces, but that being said, he was a unique individual, and I do think that his foals are going to be best on turf, which is what he's bred for on both sides. We've got the advantage here that he started his stallion career in the Southern Hemisphere, and therefore he's got some runners already in Australia where their seasons are opposite ours. He's got a couple of winners down there coming a bit later into the juvenile season there, and as the distances have gotten a touch longer. So look for them to develop the same way here. And of course, look for them in all those good summer and fall maiden races and stakes on turf when 2-year-old turf season begins. I'm tracking this year's freshman sires on Twitter and on DRF Breeding Live, so make sure to follow along there for more coverage. We'll discuss handicapping a few more of these horses next week, but for now, let's get you over to Kinchin's Corner with Jonathan.
Hey everybody, welcome to Kinchin's Corner. This week we're going to do the late pick 3 at Keeneland with the grade 2 Elkhorn right in the middle of that sequence. In the first leg, we're going to use 2 horses. It's not so much who we're using, but it's who we're fading, I think, that makes this an interesting play. We're going to use the 3 Linstar with the 6th length victory down at Gulfstream, and then Bam Bam Brian with the 7th length victory down at Fairgrounds. The interesting one that we're going to fade here is the 6 Aquamarine for Zayat Stables. No offense to the coach here, but the move from Baffert to Lucas is not one that gives me a ton of confidence. So I'm going to give this one a race in the bluegrass and see what happens before I jump on board there. There should be some value in this play by tossing that horse, which I think a lot of people will include based on his previous performances. I guess I have an opinion, and that opinion is that Mike Maker is really good and going 1.5 miles or longer on the grass. We're going to use 4 A horses, and all 4 of them are trained by Mike Maker. I pulled some DRF formulator stats. 20% winners for Mike Maker in the last 5 years, going 1.5 miles on the grass or longer. The interesting fact in there is that 33 of those 90-something runners were entered in races with their stablemates. So that's an automatic loss for some of them because only one horse can win. I think that number is probably a little bit stronger than it indicates, the 20%. Like I said, I trust Mike Maker immensely when it comes to running long on the grass. I made a joke a few weeks ago about putting Matt Bernier and I in a horse suit and letting Mike Maker train us to run long on the grass, and I would bet on us as well. So going to use a couple of B horses in that spot, just in case. Danish Dynaformer, who's got a win over the Keeneland surface, which can be tricky at times, and then into the post, or it's in the post, excuse me, from Jeff Mullen shipping out from the West Coast. Keep an eye on the weather. It's a little bit tricky out there, but I would imagine they'll keep this one on the grass regardless, unless it just isn't safe. In the final race, I'm going to use the 2 Awestruck as an A horse, the 4 Star Quest, and the 7 Golden Domer. The interesting thing about Awestruck, there's no interesting thing about Awestruck. You can obviously see why I used that horse. But Star Quest is coming out of those $80,000 maiden special weight races at Oaklawn Park. I think the competition was pretty tough there, and I think that the horses coming in from those races should be able to show a good account of themselves. And I'm also going to use the 7 Golden Domer. Felt like he was given that race last time and should improve off of that, and that should be enough to get us home in this pick 3. We got to cash a ticket at some point.
Let's move west for the Grade 2 Calforinian, one of 2 graded stakes races at Santa Anita on Saturday afternoon. Let's take a peek at this field. $200,000 is the purse. We're going 1.125 miles. Matt, Mike, Bob Baffert has 2 big names in here. The number 1 Collected, the number 2 Cupid. Mike, let's start with you. Let's start with Cupid, a horse that showed a lot of ability, a lot of talent as a 3-year-old, but at times could be an in and outer.
Yeah, he didn't always show up and run his very best race, but when he did, he was certainly a solid 3-year-old. I don't know, Dan, I kept looking at this race, and I sort of feel like at the end of the day, I suppose one of these 2 Baffert horses is going to win this race. My problem is, I just don't want to bet either one of them. If you put a gun to my head and force me to take one, I would just take Cupid and hope he could take a step forward as a 4-year-old, but I don't want to bet real money on either one of them.
Matt, you were a big fan of Cupid last year, and if you believe pace makes the race, there's a very strong possibility that Cupid can get right to the front. How concerned are you about this 9-furlong distance immediately off the layoff?
Yeah, it certainly is a bit of a concern, mainly because Baffert doesn't do this. Over the past 5 years, he's only had 1 horse off of a 180-day layoff or greater come back at 9 furlongs, so this just isn't something that he normally does. I feel like if he takes any sort of step forward, I just think he's better than these other horses. And that's not to say that these other horses can't run. Collected was electric, winning that most recent start at Santana Mile. There's some other really talented runners in here as well. I just think Cupid, if he can kind of keep his act together, because he's been his own worst enemy in many situations, if he can behave himself and take a small step forward, I just think he's better than these horses.
Matt, is Follow Me Crev this good? 3rd last time out in the Santa Anita handicap, although he was never threatening the top 2 and he saved every inch of ground to boot, but his figures are getting better, and if he gets some pace, this distance should be right up his alley.
Yeah, I do think he is this good. The question becomes the pace scenario. I mean, if you think Cupid is just going to be out there all by himself, then Follow Me Crev is probably going to be up against it. If you believe that maybe you have Prime Attraction that goes, or maybe you have the horse down the inside Collected that push things early on, maybe it sets up for Follow Me Crev. Keep in mind, Follow Me Crev a couple of years ago was coming into the Santa Anita handicap on a roll, and he would have been one of the choices, and then unfortunately he got hurt. He ran just fine in the big cap this year. I think he fits in here very well. ultimately pace makes the race.
Mike, you want a price, you want a horse that could be close to the pace, especially over the speed-friendly profile at Santa Anita. Tell us about the number 4, Prime Attraction.
Well, that's certainly one of the things that I did like about him, is that I feel like he can get the right trip in this race. And because I don't love the 2 Baffert horses, or at least don't want to bet on them at short prices, I wanted an alternative to them. And I wonder if Prime Attraction isn't the alternative. I think he'll get the right trip in this race. I like all of his races. Now, obviously, he's got to take a step forward to win this race. And there's a chance he's just biting off more than he can chew right now in a Grade 2 race. But trips can go a long way. I think he'll get a good one. He's got some recency on Cupid as well, which I like. And I think he will get the 1 1/8. He wanted a 1 1/8 on turf in his last start. When he lost at a 1 1/8 on the main track, the only time he tried it on the main track, I thought he ran great that day. He was under a lot of pressure up on the lead in that race, and he almost made it stand up. He won't be getting that trip in this race. He's going to be sitting off the pace somewhere in here. So maybe the trip works out for him. Maybe he catches Cupid at the right time. He's a price. I'm going to bet him.
Of the Baffert horses, I prefer Collected simply because he has the recency. Now, he had an absolutely wonderful trip last time out. 3-ply speed duel in front of him. He was sitting in a great spot in 4th, watching all of that action. But I just love the way he rolled by those horses on the turn and kept right on going. Remember, this horse started out, he was supposed to be a turf horse. Now he's 4 for 4 on dirt. I don't think the 1 1/8 is going to be that much of an issue for him. And if Cupid has to deal with Prime Attraction in the early portion of this race, he might sit in the catbird seat yet again in 3rd. We'll see how good Collected is, because he's going to step up in class right now, but he is sharp. I'm going to go 1, 6, 4, and 3 in the Calforinian. Up next, our best bets for the weekend. Time for our best bet segment here on Out of the Gate. Mike, you're going away from New York. Laurel is a nice card. Federico Tessio, the local prep for the Preakness. You're going for the Tessio undercard.
Yeah, it's not a New York race, but it is a New York horse at Laurel in race number 6, the Primonetta Stakes for 6 furlongs. Appealing Maggie off the layoff here. We haven't seen her since closing weekend at Saratoga, where they tried the Prioress with her. She finished last in the Prioress, but she got bumped at the break, wound up last early, and never got to show her customary early speed. It really worked against her in that race. Put a line through it. Her other races are all very good. They make her really competitive in this race. Just has to be ready off the layoff. They cannot keep her from the lead in this race, Dan. If she breaks, she goes. She's 9-2, and I think she wins.
She has got big early speed, Appealing Maggie. No doubt about that. She's trained by a fantastic horseman in Mike Hush. And Matt, Southern California, that's where you like to go. Who is it this Saturday?
Race number 7. It's a maiden special weight affair. And I'm going to go right down to the inside, the number 1 Bottle Service. This is an interesting horse that in both lifetime starts on turf, disaster out of the gate. Been sandwiched in both of them. In between the 2 turf races, you have a dirt race. Just draw a line through it. The most recent start, though, that's the one that you want to keep an eye on. Sandwiched early on, pinched back. Kent DeSormo, for some reason on the far turn, going into the first turn, I should say, said, don't worry about it, we're going to the front. Well, ultimately, that kind of backfired, getting down the lane, flattened out a little bit. But with a better trip, and I'm hopeful the rail is actually this horse's friend, where we don't have to deal with getting sandwiched. Break alertly, be forwardly placed, hold off anybody coming from the back. Should be a decent number, the number 1 Bottle Service.
I'm going to go with race number 9 at Charlestown. Big weekend in the Mid-Atlantic area. Of course, Laurel has the Tessio card. Charlestown has the Charlestown Classic card. But on the Charlestown Classic undercard, to kick off a $100,000 guaranteed pick 4, it's race number 9 at 7 furlongs, the Robert Hilton Memorial for 3-year-olds. And I'm going to go with the number 1 Poseidon's Prize, who's got the home court advantage over several shippers. This horse ran a fast race last time out against fellow West Virginia Brits. You just see him drawing away with impunity in the stretch. He's going to win by 7.5 lengths, earned an 82 Beyer speed figure, and I really like the way he took charge on the backstretch and opened up on this field. This is a horse that was a pace pressing winner in this spot. But in his last few races, he has shown the ability to sit, and it looks like there is some speed. Breaking from the inside, Poseidon's Prize, I think, can work out a good stalking trip. He is 6-1 on the morning line. And again, I think the horse for course angle might play very, very well at Charlestown. We thank you so much for watching this week's edition of Out of the Gate. We'll see you next week, and we hope you have great luck when your horses break out of the gate.